Welcome back. Now, before our conversation on developments in the Gambia, we did mention that the United Nations Refugee Agency says the ongoing violence in South Sudan has created Africa's largest refugee crisis as thousands continue to pour into neighboring Uganda. The latest influx of refugees is straining the capacity of transit and reception centers, which are way too small for the growing number of arrivals, as agencies appeal for more donor funds. Uganda is already hosting over 500,000 of South Sudan's 1.5 million refugees forced to leave their homes and seek safety since conflict erupted in the country in December 2013.
30-year-old Hawa and her 6 children recently arrived in Kuluba, a small town in northern Uganda, close to one of the many points along the border with South Sudan. She is among refugees streaming into Uganda after intense fighting broke out again in July last year, following the collapse of a peace deal between the government and opposition forces. I had just planted some crops and I was waiting to harvest. I lost everything because of the war. They are killing people and many people have died. I was scared for my life. The latest influx is straining the capacity of transit and reception centers, which are too small for the growing number of arrivals. Uganda is widely recognized as having progressive and forward-thinking refugee and asylum policies. Upon receiving refugee status, refugees are provided with small areas of land and villages integrated within the local host communities. According to UNHCR, more than 52,000 refugees have been received in Uganda since January 2017. Raymond Towongo barely escaped his hometown on an old bicycle. He lost everything when his village was attacked.
Look at me. I'm wearing torn, dirty clothes. We sleep in the bush. This is a terrible situation.
In 2016, the humanitarian appeal for the South Sudan response received less than 75% of the funds needed to meet the demands. Without further contributions, the United Nations says the abilities of the humanitarian response to provide critical aid and key basic services could become severely compromised.
3 protesters from Anglophone Cameroon who are facing half a dozen charges, including terrorism and incitement to civil war, have appeared in a military court in Yaoundé. This comes amid reports that the Anglophone community's defiance of President Paul Biya's government could spark broader discontent against autocratic rule.
The 3 civil society figures and political activists, Felix Agbo-Bala, Fontem Afoteka Neba, and Mancho Bibigsi, pleaded not guilty in a court in the capital, Yaoundé. They faced multiple charges including complicity in hostility against the homeland, secession and civil war, and campaigning for federalism following their involvement in the English region's protests. Cameroon regularly sentences people to death but has not carried out executions for years. The next hearing is scheduled for March the 23rd.
Well, the prosecution virtually told the court that they were not ready. And so the court had no choice but to adjourn the case. We cannot comment on the case itself, as you know very well. The case which is called, we don't comment.
Since October, people in Cameroon's 2 Western English-speaking regions have joined protest against what they say is their marginalization by the French-speaking majority under Biya's 35-year rule. At least 6 protesters have been shot dead and hundreds of others arrested during the rare challenge to state authority, prompting criticisms from human rights groups and concern from the African Union. Cameroon's linguistic divide dates back to the end of World War I, when the League of Nations split the former German colony of Cameroon to zones of French and British administration. Shortly after independence in 1960, voters from the smaller English zone opted to join Cameroon over neighboring Nigeria, a decision some now regret. Those living in Bamenda are no position.
We do apologize for that, but moving on, in Central Africa, the United Nations says government forces in the Democratic Republic of Congo are thought to have killed at least 100 people after clashes erupted with a local militia group in the last few days. The fighting occurred in the central province of Kasai. The UN says the troops fired indiscriminately with machine guns at members of the Kamwina Nsapu group who were loyal to a local chief who was killed by soldiers in August. The UN spokeswoman Liz Throssell also says they are deeply concerned by the high number of deaths and disproportionate use of force. Thousands of people have died and tens of thousands have been uprooted in central Congo in recent months in battles between security forces and the militia who are seeking to avenge the death of their leader, Kamwina Nsapu.
Reports that soldiers in the Democratic Republic of the Congo killed at least 101 people during clashes with members of a local militia between the 9th and the 13th of February. The clashes are reported to have taken place in the territory of Dibaya in Kasai Central Province between the armed forces, the FARDC, and members of the Kamwina Nsapu militia, who were loyal to a local chief killed by the army on 12th of August last year. According to information from several sources, FARDC soldiers opened fire indiscriminately with machine guns when they saw the militia fighters, who were armed mainly with machetes and spears. Some 39 women are reported to have been caught in the fire and are among the dead. We are deeply concerned at the reported high number of deaths, which, if confirmed, would suggest excessive and disproportionate use of force by the soldiers. Last April 2016, there was this emerging conflict between this customary chief in the area with the authorities. He, as I indicated, he was killed by the Congolese armed forces in August in conflict. And it appears that since then, the militia have become radicalized and they are attacking state institutions, what they see as the symbols of the state.
A military court in Somalia's semi-autonomous region of Puntland has sentenced 7 suspected militants to death for killing several top regional officials. Reports say the officials include the director of Puntland's presidential palace, Aydin Hurus. Some of the men, accused of being members of the Al-Qaeda-affiliated Al-Shabaab group, shouted, "We are innocent," before the sentence was handed down by the court in Bosaso City. Their lawyer, however, says he will appeal against the ruling because there was no credible evidence against the 7. And the South African Weather Service says a tropical storm heading for the coast of southern Mozambique is expected to develop into a cyclone with winds of up to 118 to 165 kilometers per hour. Mozambique, one of the world's poorest countries battling with a debt and financial crisis, is prone to flooding and is especially vulnerable after a scorching drought last year. As soils degraded or hardened by dry spells do not easily absorb water. Heavy rains could also impact subsistence maize farmers at a time when Mozambique is one of several countries in the region battling an infestation of crop-damaging armyworms, an invasive species with a taste for corn. The South African Weather Service says that Tropical Storm Daniel would likely reach the cyclone stage early on Wednesday before making landfall around midnight. It's expected to move into South Africa on Thursday before moving westwards on Friday. And that's it on today's edition of the program. Thank you so much for watching. I am Bisi Adebayo.